All right. Hello, thanks for coming. I'm happy to introduce Lauren LaPuma. Is that correct? How to say it?
You got it.
Great. And she is currently the series scientific communications editor. And she just started a few months ago, so we're happy to welcome her to the series team. And she has a bachelor's and master's of science in biomedical engineering from Tulane University. And she's an experienced science communicator and specialist, and she's had a lot of really cool positions before landing here. So for example, before coming to Earth Lab, she was the Antarctic communications editor for the US Antarctic program, which is really cool. Love to hear more about that. Prior to that, she was a senior writer and specialist and then program manager in the media relations department at EGU. And then she's also worked for some cool places like OSA Conservation, the Amazon Conservation Association, and Under the Microscope, which is part of the Women's Science Project that collects stories for, by, and about women in science. And that's just to name a few. She has a really fascinating LinkedIn page if you want to learn more about her. And something that I found interesting is that she's also a very skilled photographer. She has a fantastic website with some really pretty images, so I encourage you to check those out. And with that, I'm excited to introduce Lauren here, who's going to give us a workshop on writing effective blog posts. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. That's really great. I apologize. I am not there in person today. I had some car trouble on Sunday night and my car's still being fixed. So I'm at home, but thank you so much for inviting me to chat with you guys today. I'm really excited about this. I hope that you guys will walk away with some really good tips for science communication in general, and particularly for writing blogs. And happy to talk further at any point after this is over. I mean, I'm just kind of blow through things really quickly here because there's a lot I want to talk about, and I want to give time for questions and discussion at the end, and hopefully have time for a little fun activity. I can't really tell, but can you tell me like roughly how many people are in the room?
That goes in 12 or 13. 12. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's perfect. Awesome. Well, I will go ahead and get started. And so, yeah, thank you for that awesome introduction. Yeah, just to summarize, about me. So, my degree is in engineering. I started off working in an infectious disease lab for about 5 years, and then I switched over to science communication. And I've been doing that for about a decade. And I've done a lot of writing, multimedia production, video, podcasting, graphic design, and photography, which is a passion of mine. And I joined Series about 3 months ago in the communications department. I'm the scientific communications editor. So my role is to kind of manage all of the communications projects that our team does, and also to communicate the science of our NOAA-based work, and particularly through video and multimedia. So I'm really happy to be here. I've been familiar with Series for many years from my work at AGU, and it's such a wonderful institution. So I'm really happy to be a part of it. So I've kind of broken my talk down into 8 tips for writing engaging blogs. And these can really be applied to any kind of scientific communication outside of academia, and sometimes in academia as well. You can apply these to whatever you want, any kind of communication you want to do. So here are my 8 tips. The last one, I'm not going to tell you till the very end, just to build the suspense a little bit. But I'm just going to dive right in, and because I want to get through it all and leave time at the end. So here we go. All right, first is consider your audience. So anytime you're communicating, especially when it's outside of academia or just outside of your particular field or subfield, you really need to think about your audience, because most of the time they will not be familiar with your work or even your field or your topic of research. And this doesn't mean that they're not smart or educated people, they're just not familiar with it. So that means you're going to have to think about, the language that you use, the terms that you introduce, how you actually communicate to make your science engaging and accessible. So before you start writing or whatever your communication product is, think about your audience. Who are they? Like, are they kids? Are they adults? Are they teens? Are they students? Are they prospective new people coming into your area of research? Think about, when was the last time they took a science class, or a science class in your particular field? A lot of adults, the last time they took science class was college or even maybe high school. So it's not that they can't understand your material, they absolutely can. It's just been a long time since they've been introduced to some of those concepts. So you just need to provide more context and background and give them the right direction to go in to understand your science. And also think about, what's important to them. What is their perspective? Where are they coming from? What do they care about? And I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but just think about how to connect your science to something that they already care about that will help them engage and connect with your science and with you more readily. This might be the most important tip, is use plain language. And the goal here, anytime you're communicating with someone outside of your academic field, you really want to use shared language and be clear, concise, and conversational. And especially when it comes to blogging, with blogs, the tone is very informal, it's very casual, it's very conversational. So when you're writing, think about, rather than, writing everything out and thinking about it like an academic paper, I want you to think about it like you're having a conversation with someone over coffee or at a bar or wherever it is. Just think about, if you were actually speaking face-to-face with someone, how you would explain your work. This will really help you. And if you need some extra help, think about, if you're writing out a blog or whatever it is, read it out loud. And if it sounds weird to speak those words, then go back and rewrite it. Because you might just be used to academic writing, whether you're doing a paper, a journal article, or an abstract, and the format and the structure and the tone is very different. It's very formal. It's very often scientists use passive voice because you're trying to remove yourself from the equation. You're trying to just present the objective science without putting any of yourself in there. So often you will write things in kind of a backwards way. You'll say things like, this experiment was done, or this was looked at, but really you want to flip that around and use active voice whenever you can. You want to say, like, we did this, we found this. It just makes it more easy, clear, and easy to understand. Try to avoid jargon and acronyms as much as you can. It's not always possible. Sometimes you have to introduce a new term or a new abbreviation, and that's okay, but just try to define them. Make sure you define them and try to minimize the number of jargon terms or specialized terms that you're using as much as you can. Because if someone's reading your work and you're introducing all of these new terms or acronyms that folks aren't familiar with, they're not going to be able to retain all that information quickly. And so it's just going to kind of slow them down and hinder them from understanding your work. So try to avoid it wherever you can. And one part of this too is try to avoid scientific shorthand, even when it's like a very familiar term. So something I always tell folks is, write out greenhouse gases, don't abbreviate GHG, write out carbon dioxide, don't write CO2, don't write, molecular shorthand, molecular formulas. Try to write out the compound names, even if it's long, even if it's, complicated, it just makes it a little bit easier to understand. And like I said, you're going to need to provide a little bit more context for your audience. So think about, why are you conducting this particular study, or why are you doing this research? What is already known about this topic? What are the unanswered questions? Why are you looking at this? What is the question you're trying to answer? And just put it into context, give a little bit more background so folks know where you're coming from. And when you can, try to keep it to a 9th grade reading level or a high school reading level. This pretty much just ensures that you're using plain language and plain English. And at the end, I will give you a tool for how to tell what your reading level is. But just try to keep it, like I said, the last time most people took a science class was probably high school. So try to keep it to a 9th grade reading level. This down here is a headline from a recent Scientific American story that I saw that I really loved, that shows even lawyers don't understand legalese sometimes, and they even prefer to have contracts written in plain English. And I think this applies to science as well. Even sometimes scientists can't understand each other's jargon. I had a volcanologist tell me once that she couldn't understand some papers written by other volcanologists. So it's always a really good idea to just use plain language as much and as often as you can. And another thing you can do is to use metaphors, examples, stories, and incorporate social math into your work. So social math is something you probably have heard of, you just may not have heard that particular term. It's when you just take a quantity or a number that's very large or very small and you compare it to something that's already known. So things you hear all the time are like, it fits on the head of a pin, it's the length of a football field, it's, you know, the size of an Olympic swimming pool. Those kinds of comparisons take a number that it might be hard to wrap your head around and just puts it into context, makes it easier to understand. Here's one social math example that in a graphic form that I created at my previous job, just showing how much Antarctic whales eat in a year, because the quantities are so large. They're hundreds of thousands of kilograms. And, you know, our brains can't really wrap our heads around that kind of a number when it comes to food. So I compared it to the weight of the space shuttle. And so a blue whale eats about 7 space shuttles worth of food in a year. A minke whale eats only 1 space shuttle's worth. So it's just a way to put those numbers into context, make it a little bit more easy to understand. And there's a great online tool for doing these comparisons, which I'll share with you all at the end. Number 3 is make it personal. And, you know, we're very used to, in the science world, like I said earlier, pulling ourselves out of it. We have to be objective and remove even the appearance of not being objective. So we often, you know, remove ourselves and from the equation. But now I want you to add that back in. Add in the human element. Show who you are, show your personality, your excitement, show your emotions, even show your failures, your challenges, as well as your successes. A lot of that gets lost in the process of you know, summarizing research, whether you're giving a presentation or writing a paper. Maybe you did an experiment 100 times and 99 times it didn't work, but the 100th time it did. But all you ever hear about is that 100th time when it succeeded. But talk about those times when you had challenges, a problem that you had to figure out, something, maybe a piece of equipment you had to MacGyver in the field because it broke down and you didn't have the tools necessary to fix it. Talk about all that stuff, because that's really a part of the scientific process that people outside of science and academia don't ever get to see. And so this will really humanize you, humanize your science, make it more accessible. You know, talk about action and emotion, talk about the experience of doing your work. If you're in the field, for example, and maybe you're in a really remote area or the weather conditions are really harsh, talk about what it's like for you to be out there and doing all that work. This photo on the right, this is Dawn Wright. She's an earth scientist at Esri, and she really loves Legos. And so her Instagram posts are all about like her building Legos and doing Lego stuff. So that's just an example of one way you can show your personality and just the things that you like and add that in. It just really helps people connect with you and then with what you're saying. Number 4 is tell a story. And so storytelling is really important in communication, especially when it comes to science. And I could talk about storytelling for hours. I don't have that much time today, but if anyone ever wants to talk about it in more detail, I'm happy to. So I'm just going to go give you guys a little bit of the basics here. And there's a lot of neuroscience research that goes into why stories are so important. It's a way that human beings have been communicating with each other, you know, since our inception, since the beginning of our species. It's just a way of putting information into a format that's easy to remember, that's easy to connect with. So I really encourage you all to incorporate storytelling in some form into whatever you're writing. So here, what I've shown you here, this is kind of the basic building block of a story. It's the classic narrative arc. And so because you all are scientists, I know you love charts and graphs, you can think of it as a graph of tension over time. And so the basic structure is that the tension state starts out low, rises, falls, and then goes back down and stays low again. So the basic parts of a story, the very beginning is the exposition. This is where you're setting your scene. You're just showing, you know, where you are, where the characters and the people are in space and time. What's the background basic conditions that you're working with. Then you have some sort of inciting incident. This is the first conflict in the plot or in the storyline, the thing that kind of sets off all the action, that starts the tension rising. Then you may have more obstacles and conflict that keeps building all that tension. That's called the rising action. Until finally you get to the climax, the turning point. This is where, you know, the main, conflict in the plot has been resolved. And like you've slayed the dragon, you know, you killed the beast, and then you have to, you know, return home and finish your journey. After that climax, the turning point, you have some more things that happen. You know, the story doesn't just end there. There are other events that go along that lead to the resolution of the plot until you get to the resolution when the main conflict is basically resolved. So you can think of this like in Lord of the Rings, the climax would be, you know, when Frodo throws the ring into Mount Doom, then he has to get out of Mordor, he has to return to the Shire, all those types of things. And so finally you get to the very end, which is this lovely French word called denouement. This is just tying up of all those other loose ends, you know, wrapping it all up in a nice little bow. And something to remember, to keep in mind here, is that the denouement, so that where you're ending, your ending point, is not quite where you started out, because you're not coming full circle. The story has changed things. It's changed the situation. It's changed the characters and the people involved. So you're not exactly at the same point where you started. And that's important to remember. And so a lot of stories, whether they're books, whether they're movies, TV shows, they will often have multiple arcs, multiple climaxes, multiple turning points throughout the whole thing. But this is just the most simplest basic expression of it. And you guys are actually really lucky because there are a lot of themes that are often used in literature or in just storytelling in general that are really applicable to science. And so I'm going to go over a couple of them now. And this is not an exhaustive list by any means. I'm sure there are more that I'm leaving off here. And I'd love to hear any of your guys' thoughts on other narrative themes that might apply. But I'll give you a couple examples here, and it might be a good idea for you to put your science into one of these themes for context, and might help tell your own story. The first is pretty self-explanatory. It's the journey. It's just the idea of going on a journey or a quest and accomplishing something, and all the things that you encounter along the way that lead to, you know, the accomplishment of the, you know, to the end of the journey or to the goal that you're trying to reach. A really great example of this in science is Chasing Ice. It's for those of you who aren't familiar, it's a documentary about photographer James Baylog and his quest to photograph climate change by taking time-lapse photos of glaciers in the Arctic. It's a fabulous film for anyone who hasn't seen it. Highly recommend it. Another one is The Mystery. Also pretty self-explanatory. There is something that is going on that you need to that you or whoever needs to figure out what's happening. Excuse me. So there are so many good examples of this in science, right? One of the really great science books on this is called The Ghost Map, and it's the story of a cholera epidemic in London in the 1800s. And because of this one epidemic, this was how actually, and non-scientists were really involved in this, how they figured out where the epidemic or where the initial infections came from, but they also figured out that cholera was waterborne instead of airborne. And so it was really just this whole mystery of all these folks getting sick in this one area of London. And it's another really great book. I highly recommend reading it. The next one is Along Came a Stranger, or another way of saying this is A Stranger Comes to Town. And this is really kind of like that classic Western plot line where someone shows up and then nothing is ever the same. When you talk about science, it's a really good metaphor for natural disasters. Things like hurricanes, wildfires, earthquakes, volcanoes. You know, something happens to people who are just living their lives and then it changes the landscape forever. One example of this is this documentary Trouble the Water about Hurricane Katrina. Great documentary. So just kind of think about that, especially when you're talking about earth science and disasters. Coming of age is also a really classic story that kind of hits home. And in science, it could be the coming of age of you or someone as an individual scientist or as a group of people. It could also refer to the coming of age of an entire field of study. So one example of this is the Poisoner's Handbook. And for those of you, and I highly recommend reading this book. It's also been made into a short PBS documentary as well. This is the story of some poisoning deaths in New York during the Jazz Age, and how the coroners at the time had to figure out what was going on, how these people were dying, and how to find like the appropriate culprit. And so it's got a lot of narrative themes in it. There's the theme of the mystery, also of coming of age, because these coroners, and like they were basically the first medical examiners, they had to create the entire field of forensic science from scratch. They had to look at these deaths, figure out what was going on, you know, create all these, you know, protocols for figuring out how people had died. it's a really great story. And so you can think of coming of age also as just like an entire field coming into its own. Perseverance is another one. And that is just, you know, the idea of you keep going and going no matter what obstacles you face until you get to the end. Hidden Figures is a great example of this. You know, you keep going, the idea of trying to get astronauts into space. The Martian is also a really great example of this. You know, you're stranded on a planet and you've got to survive no matter what. Great, really super applicable to science. Justice is another one, especially when we're talking about environmental justice. This book, Dumping in Dixie, is really great. Also, you know, movies like Erin Brockovich, those are also really applicable examples. So that idea of, you know, justice and making things right when they're not, and how, especially when it comes to pollution affecting different groups disproportionately, things like that. All right, so now that I've kind of given you all a little intro to storytelling, I want to do a fun activity. So I am going to show you 3 photos. I'm going to tell you absolutely nothing about these photos, but I want you all to make up a story about each photo. It doesn't have to be, I'm not talking like a whole narrative arc, just a sentence or 2 or however long you want it to be. I want you all to look at these photos and just make up a story about what is going on in these photos. There's 3, so you can choose, everyone there, you can pick, and those who are online, pick and choose. You can choose 1, you can choose all 3 of them. Pick whichever photo you want, and I'll give you guys maybe 2 or 3 minutes to think about it. If you're online, you can write in the chat what you want your story to be about the photo. If you guys are in the room, if you feel comfortable sharing, go for it. And we'll just have a little, I just want you guys to have fun with it and just think about it. So we'll just go ahead, pick a picture, and then come up with something, come up with a story about it. I feel like I should have elevator music playing or something. I'll give you guys another minute or so, but if anyone is already ready to share a story, go for it. Okay. Does anyone want to tell a story about this photo here? Anyone brave enough to share?
Lauren, I did one about all 3 of them.
All right, go for it. Tell me.
I wanted the challenge of trying to link them.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Okay, tell me. Here, we'll go back.
Okay, I didn't really word it. This is just my idea in my head. But okay, so this lady's like Oh my gosh, where's John? He's supposed to be guiding the researchers through their sampling protocol. Flash to number 2. Those are the researchers. Flash to number 3. John is at a fruit festival.
I love that. I love that. And I didn't even think of doing them together. So this is so perfect.
All right, I broke the ice. Who's next?
Anyone else brave enough to share?
Number 1 looks like there's someone on Mythbusters or something that has blown something up nearby and is surprised by how big the explosion was.
That's good. I love that.
I did the third picture. A recent alien invasion has taken hold on Pleasant Valley, Missouri, and the aliens look like humans in fruit costumes. And in an effort to dodge the alien, humans have taken to dressing up as fruit, and you just can't tell who is an alien and who is an earthling.
My God, I love
That's
it.
good.
I love it.
I love that. That's great. That's amazing. Anyone else want to share? It's okay if you don't, but this is great. I love these ideas.
I was thinking number 2 was like a long-term experiment of people trying to live underground in the Arctic, but finally this is the day when they get to go outside.
That's good.
Yeah, I thought they'd been digging a tunnel and they just realized they went in the wrong direction. I see. To me, it looks like shock, but I can't see it.
I love it. I love it. Awesome. Well, you guys are such good sports. I'm so glad this was really fun. Glad I got you guys to do it. I will now actually tell you the real stories of they're not that exciting. This is just a friend of mine. So I worked for the US Antarctic program. I spent the last winter at McMurdo Station in Antarctica, and this was really just a staged photo. This was a friend of mine who worked on the safety team, and we were just kind of goofing around one day and taking some photos with the safety equipment. I don't even know what these instruments are that she's holding, but she just got really into the drama of being like, what's happening? Safety everywhere. So not really nothing happening there. This is me. This is me coming up out of the observation tube. It's this tube that they place into the sea ice every year. And so you can go down and you can actually observe like if there are seals or any other animals swimming in the water below the ice, you can see them and hear them. It's really cool. It's really tiny though. It's like, I don't know, not more than 3 feet in diameter. It's really tiny. And so it's very claustrophobia inducing, but when I came up out of there, I was like, oh, so amazing. And then this one is actually, so this kid in the banana costume, I don't know the entire story of it, but he was autistic and dressed up as a banana one day. And I think he got suspended from school for it. And so a reporter interviewed him about it. And to show solidarity, the reporter dressed up in a grape costume. So love that. All right. So moving on from storytelling, one thing you guys can do is use or incorporate elements of news writing into your blogging or to your communications. So to understand how news writing works, you first have to compare it to academic writing. So when you all are writing a paper or an abstract or giving a presentation, you kind of present your information chronologically. You start with the introduction, the background. What did the previous research show? What do we already know about this? And then you go into your own research question that you're trying to answer, your methods, what you did. Then you get into the results, what you found, the discussion, the conclusion, and possibly what's next. News writing takes that format and flips it on its head. So for a news story, so this format is called the inverted pyramid. And so the news story is really focused on the outcome. The point of it is that the reader should know the outcome of the story in either the headline or the first sentence or the first paragraph. So the very first part of the news story is called the lead. And it's where you really just lay out the results and the implications of the study. You're basically, when it comes to science, sorry. So what you're really wanting to do here is just say, here's what the scientists found, and here's why that matters, and here's why we should care. That is the very first part of the news story. Then you go into the body of it, where that's like the more details, the who, what, when, where, why. These are the scientists, this is what they did, this is where they did it, when they did it, why they did it. You kind of maybe repeat the result and the finding again. And then you go into the tail, which is like some extra details that add a little more context maybe to the story, and then maybe talk about what's next. But really the most important thing in a news story is the outcome and the implications. So how can you all incorporate that into your writing? Just remember to kind of zoom out and focus on the big picture. Don't get bogged down into the weeds, into the details of everything that you did. Focus on the outcome, which is the results, if you have them, and what they mean. And I'll talk about that more in a second. Or if you don't have your results yet, talk about what your results could mean when you do have them, or what you hope to find. So really just focus on the outcome, and then put in the big picture. Don't get bogged down. Really just zoom all the way out. Draw your reader in with a good headline, with a good lead, with visuals, which I'll also get into more detail about in a second. And really just think of it as a distillation of your key points or your key messages. What do you want people to remember about your science? They're not going to remember everything. And the point is not to present them with everything. It's to present them with a distillation. What are the few main things that you want them to take away, and what do you want them to remember about your work? And remember, it's, with an academic study, with a new paper, you're really writing everything, you're including everything about your study. And so in a way, someone can read your paper and duplicate exactly what you did. The news story isn't like that. It's not an information dump. It's just that distillation. So you don't want to tell them everything. It's just the main points. And then a good thing to do is incorporate multimedia or visuals of any kind, or it could be audio, it doesn't have to be visual, but any kind of multimedia that will help make your science more engaging, more fun, more accessible, anything you want: photos, videos, drawings, animations, graphics. Put some GIFs and memes in there, whatever you want to do. This photograph was from Series Rendezvous earlier this year. This is a grad student, Margarita Reza. She made this cool drawing about explaining her work. She's a fabulous artist. The good news is you don't have to be a fabulous artist to do this. I love art. I'm a terrible drawer. I can't draw for anything, but that's okay because it almost makes it more fun. These are two drawings from one of my favorite blogs of all time. It's called Hyperbole and a Half. This girl just kind of writes blog posts about her childhood and fun things that happened to her. And she makes these really crude digital drawings, I think in like Microsoft Paint probably. But they get the point across. They're funny. They make you chuckle. Totally check it out if you want some more examples. But the point is, you don't have to be really good at this. Anything you add will be fun. Okay. You can even use video, and you don't have to be really good at video editing. It can be super simple. Just take a camera, take your iPhone, your smartphone, a GoPro, whatever you have, and just take video wherever you can. This is a video, I'm hoping it will play for you guys. This is a scientist that I had met up with in Antarctica this past winter, who they're drilling ice cores in one of the Antarctic ice sheets. They're looking for the oldest ice they can possibly find. So this kid took a GoPro and just put it on the end of the drill bit as they were going down the borehole and just filmed it. And this is what you end up seeing. It's not very sophisticated. It's super easy. He just threw it up on TikTok, and you just watch. You have that first person view of going down this borehole to the bottom of the ice sheet. Super cool. Threw it up on TikTok, put a couple captions on there, got tons and tons of views. What's insane to me is how far down they go and how long it takes. And then you get to the bottom, and it's you get that first person view of the bottom of an ice sheet. How cool is that? So just do whatever you can. It doesn't have to be really complicated. There doesn't have to be a lot of production value. Oops, oh, there we go. Then you can also do infographics. anything that will help illustrate your concepts. These are two that I made at my previous job. The first one shows iron concentrations in animal milk. These researchers were looking at Weddell seals, which are the southernmost breeding mammal. And it turns out they have orders of magnitude more iron in their milk, nursing mothers do, than other animals like humans and dogs, like so much more milk. And these seals have, so much more iron in their milk. So I just made this little graphic. It's not perfectly to scale at all, but that's okay. Just kind of showing how much more iron they have. This one on the right just shows these 4 types of calls made by Antarctic minke whales and like the context for each call. So are they made during the day? Are they made at night? Are they made when they're alone or when they're in groups? Is there food around? Is there not food around? And so that just kind of gives you an idea of what the purpose of these calls is. Is it like they're telling their friends, hey, there's food over here? Or maybe they're alone and they're like, I'm sad, I want friends. And so just kind of gives a little bit of context. And I will show you guys some resources at the end, but there are tons of resources out there with stock graphics, like stock animations. Like you don't have to go, you don't have to be a professional designer to do some of these things. You can make them yourself. And 7, this is maybe the most important, or maybe my favorite, I would say. Make it meaningful. And what I mean by this is show how your science is meaningful to people's lives. You really want to be able to answer the question, why should someone care? If there's any question you want to answer, it's why should I care about this work? Emphasize the value of what you're doing, whether it's helping, humans and however our society, our lives. Show how your science is relevant to people's lives. And, sometimes these connections, they're really obvious for you all who are doing the work. For other people, the connection might not be so obvious to them, and you have to really drive that point home. And the good thing is, even if you're not really sure how your science maybe is directly relevant to someone's life or why someone should care, you can think about it like this. There are things that just as human beings in the society that we live in, there are things that we already are going to care about regardless. We care about our well-being, our livelihoods. We care about our future and having clean air and water to drink. We care about our children's future. We care about our identity as a community, as a state, as a nation, whatever it may be. So if there's any way to connect your science to one of those ideas or one of those things that we already care about, that's a really great way to drive your point home. And you're kind of showing people that they do care about your work, they just didn't know it yet. And then when you can, try to end on a positive note, especially when it comes to climate science. A lot of it is, or natural disasters, a lot of it is very doom and gloom when you're talking about the extreme heat that we're experiencing right now, climate change, wildfires, things like that. It can seem really gloomy. And when that message is, repeated over and over in the news or wherever it is, people kind of shut down and they think that, okay, well, there's nothing I can do. There's no point to this. But it's really great to show that science gives us an opportunity to protect and safeguard our resources, to protect our livelihoods, our way of life, that science can be part of the solution and that there are solutions. It's really important to make those connections and say that, hey, there are things that we can do to try to empower your readers so they don't just shut down, because if they shut down, they're not going to do anything about it. And they're just going to be like, oh, well, too bad. So try wherever you can to try to, instill some hope and some opportunity there. And the last one, if it wasn't already clear from everything else I've said, just have fun. Just go have a good time. Don't worry too much. Don't take yourself too seriously with this and worry if you're explaining something just the right way. Just go have fun, experiment, try new things, try this new skill that you haven't done before. Like me, I'm a terrible artist. If I could draw something, sure, I'll go ahead and try it. Try taking some photos, shooting some video, and just see what happens. Just have a good time and try to enjoy what you're doing. So if you're interested in using some of the tools or strategies that I've mentioned, there's awesome, amazing resources available out there. For social math, there's a really great tool called the Measure of Things. And so you go to this website, you just put in your quantity, whether it's 500 acres or whatever it is, and it will give you a list of comparisons. It'll say, that's as big as New York Central Park, or that's as tall as the Empire State Building or something like that. It gives you a really good, like tons and tons of comparisons for you to choose from. Then there's a tool called Canva, which we actually use at Serious Communications. It's a free and easy graphic design tool. And there are tons of templates available for you to choose from. You could use one of those. You could just use them for ideas, for inspiration. You could modify them to something that you want to use. Tons of things to do there. It's free for personal use. Here are two on the right. These are two example infographic templates that Canva has. So you could even just start here and take some of this and modify it to match your own work. Tons and tons of resources available there. There's also this free video online editing software called Headliner. This was originally created for podcasters as a way to take an audio file and turn it into a video file. So it would take an audio, a piece of audio, and put the audio waveform up on the screen so you get some movement, and then you can have something in the background like a photo or something. But it's basically just a very basic video editing software, and it's great. It's really easy to use. It's also free for personal use. They give you like a certain number of videos that you can create per month. I highly recommend just going in there and playing around with it. You can add music, audio, whatever you want. You can also use your favorite social media apps like TikTok or Instagram, whatever you want to do things. The AGU Sharing Science program, let me go back. The AGU Sharing Science program also has tons of resources on their web pages. They have worksheets for, trying to pull out your main messages, worksheets for identifying jargon and avoiding it, worksheets, tons and tons of tools. And I helped develop a lot of them when I was at AGU, so I know that they're quality, and I highly recommend just going. Yeah, it's always got to promote my own work. So if anyone wants any particular recommendations for things, just let me know and I'll send you some links. But just go poke around on their site. They have things for working with the media and just general storytelling, multimedia, things like that. So go ahead and poke around. The Flesh Reading Ease. This is a tool that just kind of gives you a breakdown of how readable or kind of like your readability score, or your grade level score for anything that you write. And so when you're writing in Microsoft Word, you can go into your spell check and turn on this function that will give you the readability score for your text. And so this breaks down the level. It assigns a piece of writing a score from 0 to 100. And I believe it's the higher the score, the lower the grade level or the more accessible it is. So it'll show you a breakdown of academic writing versus popular literature, fiction, something like Harry Potter versus an academic paper versus a Newsweek article. So it's really a great tool just to kind of get you used to figuring out how accessible your writing is and roughly what grade level it is. And then there are some really good blogs out there if you guys want some inspiration. Real Climate, this is it's kind of exactly like it sounds. It's a climate blog written by climate scientists. They do a really good job of breaking down climate concepts and new data that comes in. The Spider Team. So this is a team that I had worked with at my previous job. They built a telescope and they launched it on a high altitude balloon up into the stratosphere to study the cosmic microwave background radiation. And so they had a whole blog about how they built their instrument, tested it, brought it down to Antarctica, got it ready for launch, prepped it, and then their whole launch and all of that. It's just a really great example of blogging, and from a science perspective, they have great photos on there as well. And Ceres also has blogs. And if anyone's ever interested in blogging for Ceres, contact me, let me know. Another good example of things to look at. We're always looking for people to blog from the field if that is part of your work. So just things to keep in mind. And that's it. And so now, I'll open it up if anyone has questions, discussions, more things you want to talk about. I'm here. And you can always email me later. You don't have to ask me a question right now. Or you can really reach out to anyone on the comms team. We're so happy to talk about this. We're passionate about science communications. So always around.
Thank you, Lauren. That was fantastic. Any questions for Lauren?
I'll go ahead and stop sharing now. And I can totally share this presentation with you guys as well if you want to have it for your own purposes.
That'd be great. Thanks, Lauren.
Yeah.
Bill's question.
Yeah, there was a question earlier about, so let's say someone wanted to start writing their own blog. Are there particular platforms that you would recommend that might be like low barrier to entry, like people could start playing around with creating their own blogs?
Yeah, absolutely. So although I have to say I'm not up to speed on all the newest ones, but I used WordPress. I use WordPress for my personal website and blog, and it's super easy to get started with. And so that's a really good one. I know a lot of other science teams use WordPress still. I mean, there's probably some new ones, but I can do some research on that, but WordPress is definitely a good one to start with.
Thanks.
Okay, Gabby asked, what about the best platforms for different age groups and format for different age groups? Oh, that's a really good question. I'm not sure about platforms, but for format, I mean, it's really about the language that you're using. And while I'm answering that, I am going to find a link and share it with you guys. Wired has done a series of videos where they have scientists in many different fields break down their work for different audiences. They start with like a kindergartner, a middle schooler, a college age student, and an adult. And it really is a great example of showing like how you just adjust your language. Let me see if I can find this. 5 levels. Yeah, here we go. It's called 5 levels. Here we go. I'm going to put this in the chat, but if you're in the room, you can just Google Wired 5 levels videos and they will show you. And so it's really just about using the proper words. And so like there's one of my favorites is there's a neuroscientist who's explaining his research mapping the brain and neural connections to a 5-year-old or a kindergarten age student. And he's basically like, there are more neurons in your brain than there are stars in the sky, or more cells in your brain than stars in the sky. And what we're trying to do is figure out how each one of those neurons or each one of those cells talks to each other. And that's it. That's the most basic concept of it. So, and he's able to, to do this to a small kid. So this is a really great, it's really just about the language that you use. And again, I would say with kids, especially, use more visuals and animations and drawings and things like that. Those will really help get your point home.
Lauren, do you ever use anything like the message box when you're thinking about writing? Are you familiar with this tool?
No.
Okay, there's from the Compass group, this is something that they use all the time. They came in and did a training with us a number of years ago. And so you start out like by defining the problem that's like at the center, and then you build out from there into like, why does it matter? Why should people care? What are potential solutions? And then there's a 4th thing that I'm forgetting. But I could see that maybe as being a useful tool for kind of orienting yourself when you're maybe starting a writing assignment or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say absolutely use that. Yeah, I mean, before you sit down to write anything, yeah, just think about those questions. What's the problem? What are you trying to answer here? Why should someone care? Why is it important? What are the implications of it? Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Great. Any other last questions? Online?
Anything online? Okay. Cool.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Lauren, for putting that together. It was fabulous.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm so happy to chat with you guys. Sorry I'm not there in person, but feel free to reach out to me anytime if you want to talk about more of this. And the communications team, the series team, we're going to try to do some more workshops on communication and, in the fall and next year, we're going to try to talk about multimedia, working with journalists, more on storytelling. So just keep an eye out for those things and wait to learn more.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Lauren.